Browser extensions turn nearly 1 million browsers into website scraping bots. Oh boy, two of my least favorite things, Chrome extensions and botnets. This is quite the story. As soon as I saw this shared by my chat, I knew I had to talk about it because I know too much about all of the pieces here. I've built some very popular Chrome extensions and had people burn novel exploits to get into Google accounts, just to get into my dashboard or to publish malware. People underestimate how dangerous Chrome extensions are, as well as how much incentive there is to turn people's devices into botnets. There has never been more need for data than there is now because we're in the AI race and everyone needs data to train their models to do all the things that we want to do with AI. At the same time, websites are restricting the access to their content harder and harder, so these companies have to pay for the data. Twitter doesn't just let you use the API for free and access everything anymore. They close the fire hose basically entirely, and you have to pay them a bunch of money for access to the data. Reddit's done the same thing, locking down their API almost entirely. These changes are happening because the value of this data is going up as these companies need it more and more. And the incentive to work around these blockers is higher than ever as well. If getting Reddit's data now costs a ton of money to do through their API, what if you can scrape the website instead to get it for free? The world of scraping and botnets has never been so drastic and dramatic as it is right now. And we're going to see things like this happening way more often. As somebody with a Chrome extension that has millions of installs, you'd think I would have made some money on it, but it's made me $0. It actually cost me quite a bit. So quick word from today's sponsors to cover some bills, and then we'll dive right in. Feels like we're in a really special time right now, where enterprises and big businesses are willing to look into and adopt tools from really small teams and companies. I'm talking to a ton of businesses in the recent YC batches that are getting attention from these massive companies like Microsoft, Google, and more. But they're all hitting the same hurdles. And one of the biggest ones is the auth layer. And no, rolling this yourself is not going to solve the problem. I don't care how good your library is. You're not going to beat out these guys, WorkOS. They make enterprise auth way easier than it ever really should be. It still kind of feels strange knowing how miserable this was for me to set up in the past. You need to set up SSO for some big business that wants to integrate with Okta. Send them a link to the admin portal. They can use whatever identity provider they use internally, and you don't have to do anything. You just send them the link and they're good to go. You need to protect from bots and all the other things that are making life way harder with these AI agents scraping the web. Radar has you covered. Makes it way easier to figure out who is or isn't a human on your site. You need to know who's been doing what on your app so you can handle compliance. The advanced event logging has you more than covered. It's actually hilarious how in-depth these logs are and how well they detail what action a user took so that you can share this with whatever company you're working with. It's so nice. You can take my word for it, or you can look at the massive set of companies that have already made the move. From OpenAI to Cursor to Vercel to Carta to SourceGraph to Perplexity to Fal. I feel like I see the WorkOS sign-in widget almost everywhere I go nowadays because they've become the standard. And they've become the standard for a reason. They are the best enterprise-ready auth solution for us modern full-stack TypeScript devs and many more as well. Let me close with what Guillermo had to say. I think we could have done even more business if we had partnered with WorkOS earlier. It's been incredibly well received. Don't make the mistake Guillermo made, and don't make the mistake I made. Check them out today at soydev.link/WorkOS. Let's break this one down. Ars Technica has some pretty good coverage, but I heard this article from Secure Annex is even better, so I'm going to start with this instead. Fun AI-generated image there. Turning browsers into request brokers. How the Mellowtel library transformed browsers extensions into distributed web scraping network. This is about how the Mellowtel library would transform browser extensions into a distributed web scraping network, making nearly 1 million devices an unwitting bot army. Many devs begin creating browser extensions with a strong passion to solve problems that they believe others might face as well. As extensions become more popular, the added burden of updates and maintenance can weigh heavily on devs who likely have other priorities. They might try to find paths to monetize the extension, but it often isn't as simple as putting a price tag on them. Totally agree. You guys have no idea how many emails I used to get every day from people trying to buy my extension so they could distribute malware to the million people that already have it installed. There are lots of monetization as a service companies that have emerged, promising devs ways to be compensated, yada, yada, yada. Libraries can be added to the existing extension, sometimes without even requiring new permissions. And in return, extension devs begin getting paid as their extensions are used. Doesn't this sound too good to be true? Yeah. Like when I was in college building Chrome Tana, my Chrome extension to redirect Bing searches elsewhere, the idea of installing this package and suddenly making a bunch of money on it would have been really, really tempting when I was a broke college kid. I probably wouldn't have done it because I would have looked into what it did, but it would have been incredibly tempting and hard for me to pass on, especially if I could maintain ownership of the extension. Most of the offers I was getting were people who wanted to either take the extension via transfer or just take over my Google account entirely. None of those were options. There are several of these libraries, but some of the more popular ones track user browsing behaviors in order to generate clickstream data. Again, the need for data has never been so great. Any weird source you can make to get more data is potentially really valuable right now. I see why these things exist. Still sketchy, still absurd. And I'm always amused when people are complaining about how bad the web is with trackers, and then they install some weird spyware Chrome extension for ad block that's just tracking everything they do. By the way, if you're using an ad blocker and it's not either built into your browser or uBlock Origin or Origin Lite, you're almost certainly giving away a ton of data you shouldn't be. Both the AdBlock and AdBlock Plus extensions are super sketchy. Keep those far away from any machine you care about. I've made it a point when I see someone screen sharing and they're using one of the sketchy ad blocks to point it out and make them uninstall it on the spot because it's so sketchy. uBlock Origin and Lite are both absolutely in the clear, but these other things are sketchy. Be careful. Speaking of sketchy, these clickstream packages are really sketchy too. Companies are creating these libraries to target devs and their advertising tech firms that they're working with to aggregate the data and offer clients, like very large companies, realistic profiles of browsing behaviors for ad purposes. That's not what we're here to talk about though, because there's a new monetization method that's even sketchier. They pay extension developers in exchange for unused bandwidth of users who have the extension installed. This reality can be far more sinister. We'll cover what it actually means, who's behind the library, and the cybersecurity risks that a company should consider if they find an extension using these libraries. Devs who integrate these libraries don't actually understand what they're adding and what they do, and users certainly don't understand that the productivity extension that they're installing is doing sketchy shit like this behind the scenes. The Mellowtel JS library is the one we're talking about. It's open source and available for inspection, but it's still pretty sketchy. What's the license on it? I'm curious. It's GPL. So this goes to show you not all GPL code can be trusted. Monetize your browser plugin. Open source, consensual, and transparent. Sure. Let's see where this goes. And again, like when you do those things, when you make it GPL license, you open source it, you're this transparent, all the branding is good, all that, devs are just going to blindly trust it. They're like, NPM install this, we're transparent, you make money, all is good in the world. Nothing is that simple. As browser extensions are primarily JS, Mellowtel can be installed in any project just by npm installing. Once done, you need a couple of permissions are added to the manifest, like the declarative net requests and access to all URLs. This is the sketchy one. This means the extension can run on any page. Very, very sketchy. I don't have any extensions that have that enabled. I would usually have to intercept network requests on a given URL, like to Bing, to redirect it somewhere else. But I've never needed all URLs permission. This one is scary and sketchy, and any extension that has this, you should be very careful about. Because that means when you're checking your bank, it has access to the contents of the page. Scary. Be careful. That said, if your extension does already have these because it needs them, let's say you built an ad block or an autocomplete for text chats or an extension that lets you customize the way pages look. All of those things already have all URLs permissions, so you're able to install this without changing permissions, which means users aren't prompted when the update comes in. It will auto-install. There are a lot of really popular extensions that could add this package, auto-install it on your computer without you doing anything, and suddenly you have this sketchy thing running on your machine. The library is then utilized by including a small amount of configuration in the extension service worker and adding a new content script that is injected into all web pages visited. The docs ask that devs let users opt in to sharing their bandwidth, but that is functionally optional, as there are no checks to determine if a real user knows what they are approving or to determine if the developer just opts all users in on their behalf. Yeah, the code doesn't actually include the opt-in for users. You just choose as the dev whether or not to opt in, whether or not it's running, and maybe you build a UI for it, maybe you don't. Funny enough, it's one of the negatives of it being open source. People can implement it however they choose to, and it seems like a lot of people are implementing it in a very sketchy way. If you're curious about the background scripts thing, that's kind of the core of how extensions work. They have a script that's running in the background. So like when you click the little button for the extension, the code that runs all of this and the JavaScript that binds to this HTML view that gets rendered, all those details are done in the service worker background script. And if you want to load something on the page, you will inject a different JavaScript bundle into the page that can do things on the page. So that's what these two pieces are. One is the JavaScript that manages the extension, the permissions, what exists where. The other is the JavaScript that gets loaded into a given page. And since it has all URL permission, they're loading it into every page you go to. So what's really happening when a user uses an extension with Mellowtel installed? The website often references an extension called Idle Forest, which uses their technology. So let's start with that. After installing Idle Forest, it asks if the user would then like to start planting as the opt-in to Mellowtel. When you look at the extension's console logs, which anyone can see. It's just part of the console logs. You can see that a Mellowtel library initialization is happening, and it logs a message mentioning that it's not been activated for enough time. This delay is a common tactic used to evade behavioral analysis. If when you first install the thing, it doesn't do anything, it's harder to notice when you're auditing the stuff that these behaviors exist. This probably helps them get through the Chrome extension review process more easily. And if somebody's reviewing this extension as an employee at Google before approving it, and they see this new library, they see a GitHub link, they go to it, see it's open source, scroll through the code quickly, like this all looks fine, and then hit accept, that's how this gets put through. Eventually, the extension activates and creates a WebSocket channel to an AWS Lambda function. It begins sending some device information like location, bandwidth availability, heartbeats, and status. A WebSocket channel to a Lambda function is not a cheap thing to do. I'm curious how that's actually implemented because I'm a nerd, but I don't want to get bogged down by the info details here. Let's just talk about what it's doing. Eventually, the service worker will receive a request on the WebSocket with a website or a list of websites. It takes these websites and injects a hidden iframe into the website that you're currently on. So here is that JavaScript that will run. It goes through the list of URLs that you were given from the server, and then it creates a bunch of iframes on the page, hides them, and mounts these URLs in them. So you're basically opening a bunch of mini browsers in the page, going to those different websites, and then you can scrape them. Why would you do this here instead of doing it in the cloud or doing it on a server farm or doing it in all these other places? The reason you would do this via a Chrome extension is because you want to distribute the cost of the compute, the cost of the bandwidth, and most importantly, the IP addresses that you're doing this with. If you do this via a server farm on AWS, that's all coming from a limited set of IP addresses that are probably already blocked by a lot of these sites. You cannot scrape Reddit from AWS. You will be limited and blocked out almost immediately. In order to collect this data, you need to hit the places from a lot of different IP addresses, ideally distributed across the world. But that's why botnets are more valuable now than ever, because sites like Reddit are locking down their data harder than ever. And the need for this is going up. It's also why there are all of these services, like one that comes up a lot, Bright Data, that do crazy things. Like they'll give you a notification in a game, for example, if you're playing a mobile game that says, get more credit by solving these CAPTCHAs. And what you're doing is you're solving CAPTCHAs for a bot somewhere else running either on another server or someone else's computer. And you're solving the CAPTCHAs to get credit in a game to scrape a site on someone else's computer somewhere else in the world to get data for some other customer. The amount of hops these things are doing in order for you to get that data as an AI company or whoever else wants it is kind of absurd. Yeah, this all makes sense. They create the iframe. They immediately style display none it so that it is not visible. They attach it by appending child. And then on load, they post a message to this iframe to do everything else they want to do. They also do a bunch of other things to make sure it is invisible, like setting all the border styles width and all of that to be invisible. So G-style opacity is 0, again, making it impossible to see. All of this is to make it so you don't know what's going on when it's going on. The iframe loads the website secretly and returns the HTML back to the service worker. The service worker parses the web page, packages the data up, and returns it back to the Lambda function. I believe this is what Mellowtel means when it says it's utilizing your unused bandwidth. Yeah. Ooh, they have a video. Let's check this out. Here you can see all the data that it is sending and receiving from the WebSocket connection. The save HTML endpoint is what it's sending that HTML data to. Here's the iframe that it loaded. Those are all the different pages that it is requesting in order to do those iframes, and then sending that data over that WebSocket connection. Wild. Shouldn't there be some protections to stop this from happening? How can you so easily load unintended content inside of any web page? Well, normally there are protections to prevent this. Common web server security headers like content security policy and X-frame options should stop this from happening. However, remember that the library requested declarative net request and all URLs access to be added to the manifest. Those permissions allow for modifications of web requests and responses as they are being made. Is declarative net request still in manifest v3? Okay, it is. I thought that was one of the APIs that got gutted. It looks like it's still pretty available, which is kind of crazy. The ability to modify web requests via Chrome extension is sketchy and should be much more granular permissions-wise. I don't love that. A lot of people think Manifest v3 was way too heavy a crackdown and Google trying to prevent ad blockers. No, it was an attempt to clean up things like this, and I would argue they didn't go far enough, apparently. So as I said, these permissions allow for modification of web requests as well as the responses as they are being made. The library dynamically modifies rules that will remove security headers from web server responses and then claims to add them back after the web page has loaded. So here we are removing rules for the things that keep the page from loading due to X-frame and CSP rules. And then we add them back later after the request has come in. Fun. This weakening of all web browsing can open users up to attacks like cross-site scripting that would generally be prevented under normal conditions. Not only are your users unintentionally becoming bots, but their actual web browsing is now more vulnerable as well. Absolutely. If they're doing this on every request, that is super, super sketchy. Super, super sketchy. So who is behind Mellowtel? The members of Mellowtel are very active. There happened to be a public discussion about adding Mellowtel's monetization in a very popular multi-platform extension package called Plasmo HQ. Plasmo is one of the starting points to build a Chrome extension, kind of like a Next.js type thing for building extensions. I haven't had a chance to use it because I've built my extensions from scratch myself and it's miserable. It seems like it's pretty useful. Hopefully they're not going to add this though. As a business strat, it makes total sense. Why not offer devs a really easy monetization option while they build their extension? This was started by Daniba, who claims to work for Mellowtel. His avatar looks familiar. He's the founder of Idle Forest. Turns out the Idle Forest creator also works at Mellowtel. Many users respond to the thread objecting to the inclusion in Plasmo. Towards the end, user DevKingMe tries to provide additional context to the issue at hand and claims to be the founder of Mellowtel. At the end, he adds his LinkedIn, which points to a profile of Arslan Ali. He has since edited his comment and removed the links, but the edit history provides this information. I love edit history on GitHub. It's so useful. It's so useful. He lists his company as Allostep on LinkedIn. They're a new company which he co-founded with his brother. The company is quite interesting because it provides the world's most reliable and cost-effective web scraping API by avoiding all bot protections and can parallelize requests with ease. This functionality is targeted at businesses that need large-scale web scraping capabilities. Let's see how it's done. Looking through the docs, they provide a number of endpoints like scrape, batch, crawl, and more. So you hit their endpoint with the payload of what you want to scrape, the URL to scrape, and it will get you back the HTML. So users submit a web page that they would like to scrape, a country where the request should originate from, and select a format of the data that they want returned. Seems very similar to scraping instructions we saw while looking at the Mellowtel library earlier. Makes sense. Should we be surprised that a service selling scraping access originating from real users also has a shadow organization creating the library, which turns endpoints into scraping bots? Crazy. This isn't even a conspiracy. This is just obviously what's happening. This has very real risks. Arbitrary web requests on behalf of users are sketchy. For example, if there's an endpoint at your bank that is the thing you post to in order to send a transaction, I could make a request for a URL, bank.com/API/transaction, user ID, whatever. And if I can get someone to hit that endpoint with their cookies, it will trigger the transaction and possibly pay me money. This is why cross-origin stuff is so scary, because if I can make a request in a environment on your machine where your cookies are applied to the request, I can do things you almost certainly don't want me to be able to do. Because if I can hit an endpoint with your cookie, I can trigger anything you can trigger by hitting endpoints. And to companies that are being hit with this, it just looks like traditional traffic. There's almost no way you can identify this traffic as suspicious. And since Allostep's such a small company, it's almost certain they're not good at protecting things here. Point two is that it's utilizing users as proxies into sensitive networks. So if you are trying to restrict people having access to a thing based on having a real IP address, you're trying to block VPNs, trying to block all those other types of things, that gets worked around here very trivially and hurts you as a business. Mellowtel does try to prevent cookies in the iframe, but that code can very easily be manipulated or even just break or miss cases. This is super risky behavior. Allostep claims that they're verifying each company using the service, but things slip through the same way Chrome extensions installing this slips through. You can't trust that at all. Threat actors have been known to abuse object request brokers in order to carry out their attacks. Historically, the brokers are compromised virtual private servers or edge router devices, but in this case, browser extensions are providing the same capability. This allows, again, for attackers to obfuscate where their traffic is coming through by brokering it through different things. And this is a really useful way to broker that traffic. And again, the security header piece in particular is terrifying because in order for it to work, it has to remove these security headers set by trusted web server resources. These web servers often depend on these headers to prevent malicious injection attacks and assume they will always be present unless there is much more severe compromises at hand, like a man-in-the-middle type of attack. Well, that's essentially what we have here. Instead of the man-in-the-middle being something between your computer and their computer, the man-in-the-middle is this extension in your browser. So when the request comes in and it has a header that says, don't put this in an iframe, if the extension can manipulate the request to get rid of that header so the user can put it in the iframe, that is a man in the middle. It's not in the middle the way we expect, where something like your DNS or your ISP is changing the shape of the traffic, but now it's your extension doing that in the browser, which is terrifying. While it is possible that Allstep have good intentions here, there's clearly some obscurity in what they're trying to do across these things. The business practices are nearly identical to advertising tech firms which operate shell companies that offer extensions which track user behavior in order to sell browsing profiles to larger companies. Mellowtel did not become a long-standing first-class integration into Plasmo. Thank God. That's very good to hear. Many devs described the library as malware, which led to its removal. But there are historical artifacts in some extensions which show they may have included the library for a brief time period before removing it. Mellowtel not being included in Plasmo has likely limited its distribution significantly. That's good at least. Mellowtel has been found in extensions in Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. I would imagine it could be found in Safari as well. Safari's permissions are a little more limited. I'd be surprised if Safari extensions can do all these things, but I'm curious. Mellowtel offers libraries that could be included in Electron and Flutter as well. Fun. Google's begun removing some of the extensions, thankfully. I hope that there's now enough data for them to just blanket remove all of these. Really hope so. This is bad. Seems like Google could have knowledge of Mellowtel being added to extensions. Some of the extensions have removed the library in more recent updates. Very thankful to see. 129 Edge extensions have been identified using Mellowtel, and 121 are still active. 71 Firefox extensions have been identified, and 69 are still active, so they've only removed 2. There are at least 1 million users on these extensions that have Mellowtel set up with them. They have a whole list of all the extensions, versions, and platforms here too, which is really good. Again, the Secure Annex guys killed it with this reporting. Check them out for sure. I love the Shad CN picture here. Good vibes from these guys. Definitely something worth checking out if you want to manage your software extensions safely. And if you want all this additional reporting, links in the description to the post. The last bit they have here is about some popular Chrome extensions that pay you as the user, and you're getting some percentage of what they're being paid using stuff, again, like Mellowtel. My guess is they're probably using other things as well to increase how much money they can make off each person installing. You get the idea, though. These things are sketchy. Be careful with them. Audit the shit out of every extension you have installed. There are way too many of these sketchy extensions, and people are careless when they install random things on the Chrome Web Store. I get why, because it just feels like a little button in the corner, not like a real thing that has access to all the stuff on your computer. But like a mobile app on your iPhone or even your Android phone is in many ways more restricted than a Chrome extension, which is terrifying. You should treat each of these things the way you would treat installing something in your terminal or installing something on your computer directly. They have way too much access. If you wouldn't switch to a browser made by those people, you shouldn't use their browser extension unless you've checked the permissions to make sure it can't do basically anything at all. Be careful with the extensions you install and what they're capable of doing. This is super, super scary. We're going to see way more of these things going forward because the need for this data has never been greater, and the amount of effort being put in to restrict scraping has never been higher. So everything's weird right now. Be cognizant of that and do your best to make sure you're not installing sketchy shit. That's all I have on this one. I hope you're not too scared, but you should be a little scared. Be careful about these things. It is sketchy. Your data is important. Don't give everyone access to everything you do on the web. Let me know what you guys think. And until next time, peace, nerds.